Well, we've been using the Empow i-SIEM platform for a total of 4 years across two companies, but 2 years in my current company. So some of our primary use cases with Empow would be, we have a strong desire to understand who did what, where, when, and why, as I like to say internally. And so the near real time, high fidelity, security monitoring capabilities is certainly our primary use case. Another set of use cases revolve around gaining as much insight from a threat intelligence perspective and being able to correlate that back to an alarm and to do so in an automated fashion. Another set of use cases were centered around the automated mitigation capability. And of course, another group of use cases is around the general reporting and analytics within the platform. So, Dannie Financial Solutions is, in fact, in the financial services industry, or we would say, are as the majority of services that we offer, being financial services centric. So we actually operate or support almost every industry in the marketplace. And so, we store, process, and transmit highly sensitive information. Sometimes that information is pre-market. Other times that information is personally identifiable information. Other times that information is personal health information, et cetera, depending again upon our client requirements. And so security is cornerstone in all we do. It's in our DNA, as we like to say internally. And so being in a position to understand when we are at risk of cyber attack is obviously paramount. The features of Empow that we find most valuable would be a couple. First would be the automated mitigation capability. Second would be, as I view it, to be a next generation capability of the attack replay. Just kind of walking back from the event, historically, to really provide that visualized representation of the attack lifecycle. Another would be the ability to rapidly deploy a comprehensive coverage tool without the need to spend months and months planning for a deployment with such emphasis placed on correlation rules and the alike. The ability to put aside the need for a high number of correlation rules is extremely advantageous to us. Saves time, saves money, drives fidelity, scores higher. It's just a fantastic. The power of the AI and the natural language processing capability is, in my mind, best measured by the outputs, right? The fidelity of the alarms that we receive, it's just night and day, to be quite transparent, as compared to SIEM platforms and other platforms we've used in the past. I also feel that that's probably a major, probably leading reason why our overall alarm volume is significantly lower. We deal with far less alert fatigue, as I'd say. We deal with a lot less false positives as a direct result, I think, of the AI and NLP capabilities. I can share that our overall false positive rates are significantly less. It's definitely less. It's definitely removed about 60% of the total volume of alarms that we need to respond to each month over the last year. Also, it's worth mentioning that we like to tell ourselves, at least, that we spend considerable amounts of time in the years past focusing on managing those correlation rules, ensure that we had the right prioritization applied for those rules, that the rules were accounted for, or took into account our technology deployments and just generally our shift in our portfolio, adding, removing devices, retiring products and services, adding new innovative solutions and such for our customers. To the extent that we have a 90-minute session twice a month with a partner of ours dedicated to just that session. And today we don't have any meetings per month. We're focused on correlation rules, and we were able to avoid 6 headcount needing to be hired our youth theater as a direct result of transition impact. So it's really twofold. So when I think about the dashboard and the quality of the dashboard, I think it's one of the features that is just fantastic to speak about. So if you're able to design a dashboard that will see, so I can get a quick snapshot to either, broad lens over the last 7, 10 days, much less diving in a little bit more specifically on an event of concern, but the integration between Elastic and Empow has been quite impressive for a couple of reasons. I'd say, A, we're a prime example of an organization that must have a high degree of flexibility in our deployments. We have full cloud native deployments of products. We have full cloud native deployments of corporate systems. And of course, we have on-prem deployments of both. Our cloud deployments span many cloud providers. And so I need to be able to orchestrate and scale up and scale down my footprints depending on geography, depending on cloud providers, depending on the templates of the business relative to life cycles of some of our products, and so on and so forth. So having a lot of leverage to pull, that Elasticsearch really has proven to be very, very attractive to us for supporting that the set of requirements of flexibility. And then I think they play a big role in really making it so incredibly easy to plug into other security tools, other network platforms, other application platforms, whether internally developed or otherwise, or commercial. We have a significantly higher confidence in our ability to automate mitigations, and we've been, you know, we've had technologies across SOAR, across cyber threat intelligence, integrated into our platforms for over 4 years now, and so we'd like to tell ourselves at least that we're reasonably experienced with both of those shown technology categories, and the one of the most impressive accomplishments we were able to showcase internally was building metrics around the fidelity of our playbooks when they're executed, that we have high degree of confidence that we have the right playbooks in place. And it's also worth mentioning that we're a global organization. We are corporate focused primarily, not consumer focused. And so we know where our clients are, generally speaking, from a geographic perspective, as an example, but our clients travel, right? So we want to be hyper conservative on those mitigation techniques as not to adversely affect the client experience with our product lines. And I was quite surprised that even though we took a very conservative approach initially, the degree of accuracy, the percentages of false positives being almost zero, when those mitigation playbooks were invoked. And so to distill it down, the enablement of automated mitigations that the Empow product line has provided us has just been incredibly impressive. So the Empow product line, one of the most impressive capabilities to our security analyst team is just how little maintenance is required to ensure that we're focusing on the right threats. So the correlation rules themselves require effectively little to no maintenance from a client perspective, which is tremendous. Leaps forward as compared to other product lines, and of course, SIEMs of over the last 10 years. The correlation rules maintenance has been one of the most time-consuming bodies of work that was required, and one of the areas where you had a high degree of risk of focusing in the wrong areas. Right, we spent an enormous amount of time being hyper focused on ensuring that we had the right correlation rules in place, that the fidelity of those rules was sound, etc. And we just can't begin to mention just how pleased we are that for the most part that's no longer something we have to be concerned about. We are saving so very much time. We deal with billions of events a month. We are definitely a data-centric organization, and easily I would say that we are able to save 75% of the headcount for security operations that would otherwise be needed given our scale. Now we're in a bit of a unique situation where Dannie Financial Solutions was a spinoff from Dannie just shy of 4 years ago. So we're still in a growth mode in many respects. And so while we are still continuing to expand our security organization from an FTE and just generally speaking a headcount perspective, it's very easy to quantify that without Empow, we'd be looking at 7 to 10 more resources being required as opposed to the 1 or 2 that we have focused on the platform today. And focus on the platform includes capacity management, general system administration of the environment, and of course, monitoring and responding to the alarms that are generated. We are, and I'm in a unique position wherein we've been growing the security organization quite rapidly over the last 3.5 years. But as a direct result of the Empow, the transition, the legacy collection of tools towards the Empow platform, we've been able to keep that headcount flat. And we've been able to redirect a lot of their time away from the wash, rinse, repeat activities of responding to alarms where we have a high degree of confidence going to be a false positive, adjusting the rules accordingly, right? And that can really be a bit frustrating for the analysts when they have to spend hours and hours a day dealing with those types of probable false positives. And so it really has helped not only us keep our headcount flat relative to the resources necessary to provide the assurances that our executive team expects of us for monitoring, but allows us to enjoy, or at least the analyst team, the feedback I get is that they spend the majority of their time doing what they love, right? Which is going after, having a higher degree of confidence, I should say, that where they're spending their time is meaningful. They enjoy getting into the incident response type activity. The ability for Empow to be managed by a single analyst, it really depends on the organization. I can tell you that I don't need a team of 20, 25 analysts any longer. It's significantly less than that. And now, to quantify one analyst, it really depends on the organization. It depends on what is your threshold for risk. Of course, that's unique to every organization. What is the size of the organization from a technology perspective? Are you dealing with hundreds of servers? Are you dealing with tens of thousands of servers? Of course, right, this is going to be indicative of your resource needs. But I would support, the statement that it takes essentially 1 to maybe 2 resources, regardless of your side, to directly support the care and feeding, capacity management, monitoring, so on and so forth of the Empow platform. It's the simplicity of the architecture is just remarkably impressive. Empow's impacted our network security posture in a fairly dramatic way, particularly in so much that we have higher confidence that when we are responding to an event, it's an event that is actionable. It's an event we should be concerned about. Secondly, it's positively impacted our network security posture by way of the automated mitigations that are defined within the system. And so while the count of attacks are really, let me restate this a bit. The playbooks that we define, we take a conservative approach to that as to avoid any negative impact to our clients. But the accuracy of those playbook defined automated mitigations, we have a tremendous amount of confidence in them, and those playbooks are triggered daily, and that just reduces risk. It reduces the amount of time spent addressing to contain those risks, to mitigate those risks. So, from an overall security perspective, it's dramatically steps forward, I should say, has been quite dramatic. But also, it directly supports our compliance programs. We're very easily able to measure when we have events and what actions were taken, because the vast majority of them are actually addressed through automation. Empow has a few areas of improvement, as with any other technology. I think a couple of them that are top of mind would be continuing to drive innovation in the dashboard. While we've been extremely impressed with the ease of use and the flexibility of being able to drill down deeply and focusing very intently on an area of interest, I think there's always going to be opportunities to be more innovative, to open up that dashboard to a more wider audience than just the security operations group, for example. And similarly with reporting, there's always a desire to have custom reporting for probably each and every client of Empow. And then also relative to keeping up with the sheer pace of the cloud native technologies, providing more and more options for clients to deploy their technologies in unique ways, I think is another area that I recommend. Empow's been able to reduce the time that we spend on just maintaining the platform significantly, particularly as compared to two other product lines that we've previously invested in. I'd say the biggest advantage in that regard would be the lack of time spent on managing the correlation rules. The simplified architecture allows us to really lean upon Empow's support teams to effectively provide almost end-to-end support of the underlying infrastructure that comprises the platform. North of 75% of our time has been reduced relative to supporting the environment, everything from the general system administration, capacity management, the overall patching and just system admin. The ecosystem has been reduced, but I'd say most notably would be on the time maintaining the application tier of Empow, particularly that of the correlation rules. And that has been reduced by north of 90% as compared to other platforms. Their ability to focus on the event with a high degree of fidelity really drives our level of confidence. So that, in so much, the net result of that is when we do receive alarms, we are quick to respond with a high degree of urgency because we recognize that there's a very high probability that the alarm is accurate, right? That the fidelity is very, very high. So it enables us to focus in other areas throughout the day, but once we do receive an alarm from Empow, we recognize it's something that we need to respond to with a high degree of urgency. The platform has made mitigation faster primarily by way of the playbooks that we had defined, so that automated mitigation. We have a number of, for example, we have a number of playbooks that are defined wherein our Empow platform signals directly to the firewall to block traffic. For example, we have no customers in North Korea. And so anytime we see an interrogation of our products, or generally speaking, any of our assets, we signal to the firewall and drop that traffic systematically, which saves time. Mitigation time has been reduced by, I'd estimate, north of 75% for the vast majority of alarms that we receive. Of course, that varies depending on the event type. But between the automated playbooks that we have defined and the confidence levels I mentioned in the fidelity of alarms, we've just been able to enjoy a significant reduction in not just the mean time to mitigate, but also our mean time to respond. So the partnership between Empow and Elasticsearch really has a very positive impact on us from a couple different angles. First would be support. There's one throat to choke, right? We pick up the phone, we reach out to the Empow team, and whether we're experiencing an application issue, a data issue, or whatever the issue may be, we have one point of contact, and that really just simplifies the overall management. Secondly, would be the licensing. Negotiating through one organization is obviously should say, obviously, but it's quite more simplified. And then, of course, as it relates to preparing for major upgrades, the fewer parties that we have to interface with just makes our lives quite a bit easier. I'd say the partnership between Empow and Elastic really has a couple of key benefits. First, the simplification. We have one point of contact for support. Regardless of what the issue type is, if we're experiencing a concern relative to the application, the UI, the reporting engines, whatever that might be, we have one phone number to call, one lead engineer to reach out to, and they take ownership relative to determining if it's an internal Empow matter or if they need to reach out across the boundaries, if you would, over to Elastic. Secondly, would be as it relates to we plan for upgrades or expansion of the environment for capacity management purposes, whatever the issue may be. Having that simplified licensing arrangement certainly makes my life easier, as we have one agreement. So we did as part of the selection criteria. As I mentioned, I had worked with Empow for a previous organization, but our requirements were very different. So we're definitely enterprise focused, but we are also corporate user focused. Our client community is primarily that of mid to large enterprise organizations across the globe, and so and how well a product organization and a services team responds in the support calls is critically important. So I give them a lot of very high marks. The responsiveness has been very high, but I think more important to the responsiveness is the quality and the accuracy of their recommended next steps to resolve whichever issues we may have. And then lastly, I'd like to give them a bit of a shout out for when they have given me commitments around enhancements, such as in enhancing the reporting capabilities, some minor adjustments to the dashboard, and those types of feature requests. They've met those commitments as it relates to quality and timeline. There is complexity to the initial deployment in so much that we were migrating from an existing fairly sizable deployment of another product line. And actually, it was a couple of different solutions in place that made up, kind of comprise our overall enterprise security monitoring solution. We had the SIEM, we had our SOAR platform, we had a cyber threat intelligence interface from a number of different feeds, etc. And so there was some complexity that both several of my teams and, of course, the Empow team needed to So our overall implementation strategy really was bringing both Empow and members of my representatives from my teams together to build a plan. Right. So we established a few key milestones aligned to those milestones relative to availability of resources on both sides and ensuring that we really understood what we're trying to accomplish, not just from an architecture perspective, but also, for example, taking into account key business timelines that we need to be mindful of, where we just didn't have an appetite for some major change management activities to occur. And so that we each brought project management resources to the table. We each brought a lead architect to the table, and we each brought threat analysts to the table to ensure that we understood each of those perspectives to really comprise that team and ensure they were set up for success. I would estimate a total team makeup, excluding myself, would be 6, 2 from Empow, and 4 from my team. The initial deployment took just a couple of weeks, and then most of that was planning. The actual technical activities are fairly execute quite quickly. And of course, then there is the migration of the primary existing data store that you need to migrate from your old SIEM environment. But there's also the body of work to redirect log streams, redirect other, ingestion of data from a large, hundreds, and really for us, several thousand devices, north of 5,000 devices, just for production alone. And so, of course, that takes time. And so the So we have one dedicated resource that's accountable for ensuring that the Empow environment's healthy. So one from a maintaining perspective, and we have a team of threat analysts on staff, and we have a third-party managed security services partnership in place as well. So it's difficult to answer directly as it relates to maintaining, but there's definitely one FTE whose primary role is to ensure that the Empow platform is up and running, is healthy, and satisfying the needs of our internal clients, which would be our team of cyber threat analysts. So I found the stability of Empow to be, quite honestly, and I don't want to jinx myself, so I'm going to knock on some wood here, if you would, but we haven't had any stability challenges yet. And of course, that is directly attributable to the architecture that we put in place, and for Empow and other solutions that we deploy. We certainly plan for highly available solutions across each deployment site or per data center, and for the geo redundancy is available. But so far so good. We've not had any significant operational hiccups with the platform. The scalability of Empow, I believe, is endless. I feel that they have an architecture and that is highly scalable. It's been proven for both on-prem, cloud, and hybrid environments. So, which reflects what we presently have, right, as a hybrid, environment here at DFIN. But I suspect they can scale to almost any size needed. The question will be what are the needs of the unique needs of the organization where they're being deployed, and what is their appetite for investing to ensure resiliency, either locally, regionally, or globally. And so, of course, those things play a role in how quickly and how complex the architecture must be in order to scale. But I would suggest it's infinite. Empow, without a doubt, is the most important monitoring tool that we have at our disposal. It is also worth mentioning we were able to retire 2 other tool platforms and as part of that migration over to Empow. I would be remiss to even attempt to say that it has a higher priority than that of, say, our mitigating technologies like firewalls and IPSs and the like. But from a monitoring and from an incident response perspective, there's not a doubt about it. Empow is the most valuable asset we have in our toolkit. It is the standard for security operations. So anywhere my organization deploys technology assets, Empow will be providing coverage, if not already. So we have We came to the realization that we needed to make a change, in large part because of the cost of scaling was becoming quite concerning. Secondly, we went through a series of upgrades a little over a year ago that was problematic, and so anytime we experience something that's impactful, we want to pause and reflect back what we did well and what our opportunities were, and did we miss any opportunities to avoid that situation from being realized. And so we used the outcomes of those reflections to revisit the market and made the decision to really pursue Empow as our lead solution for security operations. We did, as we do with almost every technology selection. We look at the market. We for this particular technology stack, there were 5 or 6 different players that we looked at intently. And then, as with most organizations, we take that broader view. We narrow it down to 2, usually 3 finalists, go into a formalized proof of concept lab environment, run that for an extended period of time when it's something so critical as a SIEM, as a SOAR, your primary reporting capabilities for security purposes. So we had an extended evaluation, and we followed that crawl walk before we consider running model relative to our rollout, our migration. So some of the SIEM providers that we looked at when we revisited the market would include Logarithm, Splunk, Empow, to name a few. I'd say that some of the pros would be the simplified licensing model. Certainly, both organizations have had feedback over the years from many clients that that's an area of concern. Particularly that with Splunk, I think it's well known that that's an area of concern for many organizations. I would also say that the simplified architecture, particularly leveraging the Elasticsearch technologies, really prevents the need to have a complex architecture with high power CPUs in place across each of your footprints where you have log collectors, for example, deployed. So that was a major value add and was very attractive to us. And then as it relates to the SOAR side of the toolkit, there was no need to purchase an independent SOAR platform. The innovation that Empow brings to the market just mitigated all of our kind of address all those use cases natively, and so we were able to just completely retire that from that toolkit completely out of our environment. The decision to partner with Elastic and for that strategic partnership to be in place wasn't a tier 1 criteria for us, but what was the outcomes and capabilities that partnership has resulted in. For example, the speed to rapidly scale up, the ease of scaling down, the ease of migrating from, say, a primary on-prem data center strategy to a hybrid, almost 50. So we evaluate that partnership between Empow and Elastic in a couple of different dimensions. First and foremost, what was our experience like as we were negotiating? Was Empow in a position to adequately represent both the business terms for Elastic and support terms and other commitments that we needed to work through? And the answer was yes, they did. It felt very seamless to us. Secondly, of course, is the simplicity, as I mentioned, the simplicity of the licensing model. um, just made that process of acquiring the technologies, so much more simple and straightforward than what we experienced with previous relationships that were in place. So I don't want to go into specifics on the exact dollar amounts, but I'll share this: that we were looking at seven-figure investment being necessary to sustain our growth projections for our log ingestion requirements just for production. And we had a goal of ensuring that we understand who did what, where, when, and why across all assets: production, staging, development, field devices, laptops, iPads, etc. And not only were we able to avoid all those costs relative to growth from a point in time forward, of course, the cost structure of Empow as compared to the existing run rate for both existing tools um, was cheap. It was cheaper for us to migrate towards Empow than it was to sustain on our legacy platform. And so when it's cheaper to migrate, obviously that's very attractive. That's not that doesn't complete the full. The biggest lesson I've learned from using Empow would be just how far um, the technology has surprised me relative to orchestration of the automation of our mitigations. That's one that was quite surprising. The accuracy, the level of confidence I have in those playbooks surprises me at how much confidence, in fact, I would have, and it's quite high. The Another area that surprised me would be the level of confidence that we have now in our ability to scale up and scale down, and scaling down sometimes can be equally as tricky. And then I don't have to put up with any longer these hyper complex licensing agreements every time I want to add some additional reporting, as a compliance centric or a regulatory specific GDPR or PCI or Sarbanes-Oxley, whatever. The advice that I would give to anyone looking at Empow would be primarily ensuring that your planning is sound. I know that I'm very favorable of when I think about our experiences with Empow. It's refreshing to think back about how easy that journey was. Such a difficult technology stack, and not only was it surprisingly simple, it should not have been. Just not long ago, given we were not standing up a deployment of a net new SIEM environment, right? We were needing to build and deploy, and then migrate a very sizable deployment to this new ecosystem. And inevitably, we expect there to be some bumps along the road, and there were very, very few. So, in short, I attribute that back to the quality of planning, and the reliability of the technology that Empow brings to the table. So my advice would be ensure that your planning is sound. While it's exciting to know that the technology is very stable, it's exciting to know that the integrations are very straightforward with API-driven integrations that, that they never can really take into full account the uniquenesses of your business, and therefore planning is absolutely paramount. If I was to rate Empow on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give them a 9.5, probably. And why it's so high is that there's no competitors on the market, in my mind, that have really that really transformed the SIEM industry as much as Empow has. And it's impressive the speed to which they continue to innovate. Every couple of months, we're excited to learn about the latest and greatest capabilities of the platform. And most of the latest innovations of late have been centered around their automation capability. It's just been such a tremendous impact on my organization to focus on what matters and to have high confidence that where we are spending our time, that it's worth doing so. The alert fatigue, the false positive rates have just plummeted. So it's just really exciting. They have, in my mind, they're transforming the industry in a manner that no one would have expected, quite frankly, not long ago.